The door of the ark was sealed, and then the rain began. Not an ordinary rain, but the unmaking of the world itself. Tonight, the waters rise, a single vessel floats upon a drowned earth, and everything depends on whether a tired dove will ever return with a sign that the world can begin again. Welcome to Ancient Nights. Every story here is drawn from the ancient world, told in order from the beginning of time, most of them straight from the Bible, woven with the real history of their age. Tonight, the second part of the story of Noah and the flood. Welcome to Ancient Nights. This is a storytelling channel. Every story you will hear here is drawn from the ancient world, told in order from the very beginning of time, moving forward through the centuries, one story at a time. Most of what we tell comes directly from the Bible. Tonight is one of those nights. Tonight we tell the second part of the story of Noah and the flood, the story of the waters that came, and the long wait for the world to be reborn. Last time we told the first part of Noah's story, of a world filled with violence that grieved the heart of God, of one righteous man who walked with God when almost no one else did, and of the great task Noah was given, to build an ark, a vast vessel of wood, and to gather into it his family and two of every living creature, in preparation for a flood that no one else believed was coming. For years, Noah built, and now, at last, the ark was finished. The vessel stood complete against the sky. And the time had come. God spoke to Noah one final time before the waters came. He said, "Go into the ark, you and all your household, for I have seen that you are righteous before me in this generation." And then he gave the last instructions. "Bring the animals, 7 pairs of some, 1 pair of others, as the text describes, the birds and the beasts and the creeping things, male and female, to keep their kinds alive upon the earth. For in 7 days, God said, I will send rain upon the earth for 40 days and 40 nights, and I will blot out every living thing that I have made." 7 days, the final warning. 7 days before the world would change forever. And then comes one of the most quietly astonishing images in all of Scripture: the gathering of the animals. The text tells us that they came, 2 by 2 of all flesh in which was the breath of life. They came to Noah and entered the ark. The birds according to their kinds, the animals according to their kinds, every creeping thing of the ground according to its kind. Male and female they came. Imagine it, if you can. The great procession of living things moving toward the ark from every direction, the beasts of the field and the birds of the air, the great animals and the small, creatures walking, crawling, flying, coming from the forests and the plains and the hills, drawn by something beyond themselves toward the vast wooden vessel and its open door. 2 by 2 they entered, into the ark that Noah had built, into the refuge that would carry them through the destruction, and into a new world. The text says a beautiful thing. It says, "They went in as God had commanded him, and then the Lord shut him in." The Lord shut him in. Noah did not close the door himself. God closed it. God sealed the ark, with Noah and his family and all the living creatures safe inside. It is a small detail, but a tender one. The same God who had commanded the ark to be built now closed its door with his own hand, sealing his people and his creatures safely within, before the waters came. And then they came. The text describes it with terrible power. It says that on that day, all the fountains of the great deep burst forth, and the windows of the heavens were opened, and rain fell upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. Notice the two sources of the water. From below, the fountains of the great deep bursting forth, as if the very foundations of the earth had broken open and the waters beneath the world came surging up. And from above, the windows of the heavens opened, as if the sky itself had become a door through which the waters poured down. This was not an ordinary rain. This was the unmaking of the world. In the story of creation, God had separated the waters above from the waters below, and the seas from the dry land. Now those separations were undone. The waters above and the waters below came rushing back together. The boundaries God had set at the beginning were, for a time, dissolved. The world was returning to the formless deep from which it had been made. For 40 days and 40 nights, the rain fell. The waters rose. They lifted the ark up from the ground, and it floated upon the surface of the deep. Higher and higher the waters climbed, over the fields, over the hills, over the mountains themselves. The text says that the waters prevailed so mightily that all the high mountains under the whole heaven were covered, and every living thing that moved upon the earth that was not within the ark perished beneath the waters. It is a scene of overwhelming destruction. The world that had been made was, for a time, unmade, and upon the face of the endless waters there floated a single vessel, the ark carrying within it the last of the living world, riding the surface of a drowned earth. Let us pause here and step gently outside the pages of the Bible to look at this story through the eyes of history. We spoke last time of how flood stories appear across nearly every ancient culture. But there is something else worth understanding: the meaning of water itself in the ancient mind. To the peoples of the ancient world, water was a force of both life and death. It was life, for without the flooding of the great rivers, the Nile in Egypt, the Tigris and Euphrates in Mesopotamia, there could be no crops, no food, no survival. Each year, these rivers would flood, spreading rich soil across the land, making the fields fertile. The ancient peoples depended on these floods, watched for them, celebrated them. But water was also death. The same floods that gave life could, when they came too strong, destroy everything, sweeping away villages, drowning fields, killing all in their path. The peoples of Mesopotamia knew this terror intimately. Their land was flat and low, caught between two great rivers, and when those rivers rose too high, the flooding could be catastrophic, wiping out whole cities in a single season. To them, the image of a flood that covered the whole world was not a distant fantasy. It was their deepest fear, drawn from real and terrible experience, magnified to the scale of the cosmos itself. And there is something profound in how the Bible uses this image. The waters of the flood are the waters of uncreation, the world returning to the deep. But they are also, as we will see, the waters of cleansing, of washing away, of preparing for a new beginning. Water destroys, and water renews. It drowns the old world, and it makes possible the new. This double meaning, water as both death and life, ending and beginning, runs through the whole story and through much of the ancient world's understanding of the great rivers on which their lives depended. There is something worth pausing on here, the number 40, which appears in the story of the rain, 40 days and 40 nights. It is a number that will return again and again through the whole of the Bible. Moses will spend 40 days on the mountain. The people of Israel will wander 40 years in the wilderness. A prophet will walk 40 days to the mountain of God. And much later, a man will spend 40 days in the desert. In the ancient world of these stories, 40 was not merely a count of days. It was a number that meant a time of testing, of transformation, of waiting for something to be completed. A period long enough to change everything. So when the text says the rain fell for 40 days and 40 nights, it is telling us something more than the length of a storm. It is telling us that this was a complete time, a full measure, a period of transformation at the end of which the old world would be gone and a new one would begin. The 40 days of the flood were the time it took to unmake a world and to prepare the way for its rebirth. And there is something worth understanding, too, about the mountains of Ararat, where the Ark came to rest. Ararat lies in the highlands to the north of Mesopotamia, in the region where the modern lands of Turkey, Armenia, and Iran meet. A place of high, snow-capped peaks, the tallest mountains that the peoples of the ancient Near East knew. To them, these were among the highest points in all the world. And so it made sense in the telling of the story that as the waters receded, it would be upon these great heights that the Ark would first come to rest, on the roof of the known world, the last place to be uncovered as the waters went down. For thousands of years, people have looked toward those mountains and wondered. Explorers and searchers have climbed the slopes of Ararat, hoping to find some trace of the Ark. Whether or not anything remains to be found, the mountains themselves still stand, vast and snow-crowned, exactly where the ancient story placed them, a real and towering landmark in the lands where these stories were first told. Now let us return to the Ark, floating alone upon the endless waters. For 150 days, the text tells us, the waters prevailed upon the earth. The rain had stopped after 40 days, but the waters remained, covering the world. And within the Ark, Noah and his family and all the creatures waited. We are not told the details of those long months, the care of the animals, the darkness within the vessel, the endless sound of water against the hull, but we can imagine the weariness of it, the waiting, the not knowing when or if it would end. And then the text says something beautiful. It says, God remembered Noah, and all the beasts and all the livestock that were with him in the ark. God remembered Noah. It does not mean God had forgotten him. God does not forget. In the language of the Bible, to say that God remembered someone means that God turned toward them, that he acted on their behalf, that the time for their deliverance had come. God remembered Noah, and the tide of the story turned. God made a wind blow over the earth, and the waters began to subside. The fountains of the deep were closed. The windows of the heavens were shut. The rain was restrained. And slowly, slowly, the waters began to go down. The ark came to rest, the text tells us, upon the mountains of Ararat, a range of high mountains in the lands to the north. And still Noah waited, as the waters continued to recede, as the tops of the mountains began, one by one, to appear again above the surface. And then Noah did something patient and wise. He wanted to know whether the earth was dry enough to leave the ark, but he could not see far from within the vessel, so he sent out birds. First he sent out a raven, which flew back and forth until the waters had dried up. Then he sent out a dove, but the dove found no place to set her foot, for the waters still covered the face of the earth, and she returned to the ark. And Noah reached out his hand and took her, and brought her back into himself. There is such tenderness in that image. The dove, finding no rest, returning to the ark. And Noah, reaching out his hand, gently taking her, bringing her back into safety. After all the destruction, all the drowning of the world, this small moment of gentleness, a man's hand reaching out to a tired bird, drawing her back home. Noah waited 7 more days, and again he sent out the dove, and this time in the evening she came back to him, and in her beak was a freshly plucked olive leaf, an olive leaf, a green and living thing, proof that somewhere the waters had receded far enough for a tree to stand again in the open air, proof that the world was coming back to life. That leaf, carried in the beak of a dove, was the first sign of hope after the long destruction, the first green shoot of a world being reborn. To this very day, thousands of years later, the dove and the olive branch remain, across the whole world, a symbol of peace, of hope, of new beginnings. And they come from this moment, from the tired dove, returning to the ark in the evening, with a single olive leaf in her beak. Noah waited yet another 7 days, and sent the dove out once more. And this time she did not return. She had found a place to rest. The world was ready again. And at last, the day came. God spoke to Noah and said, "Go out from the ark, you and your wife and your sons and their wives. Bring out every living thing that is with you, the birds, the animals, every creeping thing, that they may swarm on the earth and be fruitful and multiply upon the earth." And so Noah opened the ark, and out they came, Noah and his family, and all the animals, 2 by 2 and kind by kind, stepping out onto the washed and quiet earth, out into a world made new, a world scrubbed clean of the violence that had filled it, a world given, once more, the chance to begin. Imagine that first step onto dry ground, the doors of the ark thrown open, the light pouring in, and the great procession of living things moving out once more, this time not toward refuge but toward freedom, toward a whole new world waiting to be filled with life again. And the first thing Noah did when he stepped out onto the new earth was to build an altar, to give thanks, to worship the God who had carried him and all the living world safely through the destruction. It was an offering of gratitude, the response of a faithful heart to a deliverance almost beyond belief. And God, in response, made a promise, a covenant. That word again, the solemn and binding promise. God said, "Never again will I curse the ground because of man. Never again will I strike down every living creature as I have done. As long as the earth endures, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease. Never again." And to seal that promise, to give a sign of it that would last forever, God set something in the sky. He said, "I set my bow in the cloud, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and the earth. When the clouds gather and the rain falls, the bow shall appear in the clouds, and I will remember my covenant. And never again shall the waters become a flood to destroy all flesh." The rainbow. From that day, the rainbow in the sky became the sign of God's promise, a promise never again to destroy the world with water. Every time the rain falls and the sun breaks through and the great arc of colors appears across the sky, it is, in the language of this ancient story, a reminder of the covenant, a sign of mercy stretched across the heavens, a promise, written in light, that after every storm, life goes on. Let us sit for a moment before we close with what this whole story has shown us. It is, on the surface, a story of destruction, of a world drowned, of judgment poured out from the sky. And that is real. The story does not shy away from the darkness of it. The world had become filled with violence, and it grieved the heart of God, and He washed it clean. But underneath the destruction, the story is really about something else. It is about faithfulness, the faithfulness of one man who walked with God when no one else did, and who built, plank by plank, toward a future only he could see. It is about mercy, the mercy that preserved a remnant, that shut the door of the ark with a tender hand, that remembered Noah in the long months of waiting, that reached out to draw a tired dove back home. And above all, it is about new beginnings, about a world washed clean and given another chance, about a covenant of peace, about a promise written in the colors of the sky. The flood is not in the end a story of despair. It is a story of hope carried through catastrophe, of life preserved through death, of a green olive leaf in the beak of a dove, of a rainbow after the rain. Let us stay a moment longer with the rainbow, and with the idea of the covenant it represents, for it is one of the most beautiful ideas in the whole of the ancient story. In the ancient world, a bow was a weapon of war, the hunter's bow, the warrior's bow, the instrument of arrows and death. And there is an old and lovely reading of this moment that says, God hung up his bow. He set his weapon in the clouds, pointing away from the earth, as a warrior lays down his arms. The bow of war became the bow of peace. The rainbow, an arc of color with no arrow, no threat, a sign not of destruction but of a promise never to destroy again. Whether or not that was the original meaning, the image is powerful. The rainbow appears only when there is both rain and sun together, when the storm and the light meet. It cannot exist without both. And perhaps that is fitting, for it is a sign that appears precisely in the meeting of difficulty and hope, of darkness and light. After the rain, in the breaking through of the sun, the promise that the storm is not the end. For everyone who has ever looked up after a hard rain and seen that great arc of color stretched across the sky, this ancient story offers a meaning for it, a reminder that after every flood, the waters recede, that after every storm, life continues, that the difficult times, however overwhelming they feel while the rain is falling, are not the final word. There is always, the story promises, a world on the other side. And there is one last thing worth saying about Noah before we let the story rest. Noah was not a perfect man. The chapters that follow this story will show us his failures, his weaknesses, the ways in which even the righteous man of the flood was still fully human. The Bible does not pretend that Noah was flawless, and there is something honest and comforting in that. Noah was not saved because he was without fault. He was saved because he walked with God, because in a world that had turned away, he kept faith, and he listened, and he did what he was asked to do, even when it made no sense to anyone around him. That is the kind of righteousness the story holds up. Not perfection, not flawlessness, but faithfulness. The quiet, steady, patient faithfulness of a man who trusted and who acted on that trust, and who kept building through all the long years until the work was done. It is a righteousness available to anyone, not the righteousness of never failing, but the righteousness of walking, step by step, in the right direction, and trusting the one who walks beside you. Before we close, let us return once more to that long stretch of waiting inside the ark, for there is something in it that speaks quietly to all of us. The dramatic moments of the story are the ones we remember. The rain bursting from the sky, the waters covering the mountains, the dove returning with the olive leaf. But between the closing of the door and the opening of it, there were long, long months, 150 days and more, of simply waiting, of floating on an endless sea in the dark and the damp with no land in sight, not knowing when it would end, caring for the animals, keeping the family, holding on, enduring. We are told almost nothing of those months, but they were perhaps the hardest part of all. It is one thing to act in a moment of crisis, to build when commanded, to gather when told, to enter the ark when the rain begins. It is another thing entirely to wait, day after day, through the long gray middle of a trial, when nothing seems to be happening, when there is no sign of change, when all you can do is hold on and trust that the waters will, one day, recede. And they did recede. God remembered Noah. The wind blew. The waters went down. The mountains appeared. The dove found her olive leaf. But it came in its time, not before. After the long waiting, after the patient endurance, after the days that must have felt as though they would never end. There is comfort in this, for anyone in the middle of their own long waiting. The story does not pretend the waiting is easy, but it promises that it is not endless, that the waters recede, that the dove returns, that in its time the door opens and the light pours in, and there is a whole new world waiting on the other side. And so we leave Noah tonight, standing on the washed and quiet earth, beneath the first rainbow, with all the living world spreading out around him to begin again. The man of rest, who carried the world through the waters and set it down gently on the other side. Next week, we move forward once more. The earth fills again with people, the descendants of Noah spreading across the world. But before long, humanity will gather together with a bold and prideful plan to build a tower that reaches to the heavens and to make a name for themselves. The story of the Tower of Babel and of how the many languages of the world came to be, we will tell it together next time.